Alrighty, welcome to the Excitable Soul Podcast, everybody. Here we're interested in all things purpose. We want to know where and how people find meaning and connection in their lives. In every episode, we will be hearing the real life stories of how people have uncovered, understood, and unleashed their own unique sense of purpose. Our hope is that we can all learn from the journeys of our guests so that we can all better find a sense of purpose in our own lives. I'm host James Glover, performance coach and purpose nerd. I'm incredibly excited to be exploring these stories with you. So let's get going, shall we? Today's guest is Simon Lamb. Simon is known for his charisma, passion, and openness. He wants to break with the traditional expectations of a consultant by approaching even the largest organizations on a deeply human level. In his own words, Simon helps people and teams to make sense of the world and their own story, and shows them they always have a choice and that you have the capability to shift more than you think. Simon's dedication to creating interventions that spark ongoing impact and evolution fueled him to found the organization Purposeful Change, a business whose clients include Microsoft, HSBC, Nike, Shell, NatWest, and many more. Simon's superpower is sparking people to use their imagination to solve problems at their root. And I think this conversation will spark many of your imaginations too. It certainly did mine. Enjoy. All right, Simon, welcome to the Excitable Soul Podcast, my friend. Wonderful to have you with us. How are you feeling today?
I am feeling reflective and excited, actually. I think I'm a bit of an excitable soul today. I'm inspired by you. Yeah, I've got a lot on my plate, but it's all good stuff.
Amazing. Thank you. And as people will have kind of heard from the introduction, you are a kind of a purpose practitioner. You kind of immerse yourself in the kind of the world of these conversations on a day-to-day basis. But we've kind of flipped it on you today in that you're normally the one asking the questions and kind of provoking thought, and instead you're on the receiving end of some big questions. How does that feel for you?
Yeah, it's both fun but also a little bit anxious making. There's like kind of little positive butterflies in my stomach of having the spotlight suddenly turned on me. But let's play anyway. Let's see how I go. Wow, can I actually live up to my own work?
I have absolutely no doubt that will be the case. And also, you and I had a conversation a few months ago where we kind of described ourselves as messy men not messing around. And I really hope that that's kind of the texture and the nature of this conversation today. Actually, us being able to kind of demonstrate and role model holding attention between being really serious about what matters to us, but also kind of getting it wrong. As we
Well,
go.
you know me. That's definitely going to happen. And I feel like I'm a baby in life, even at 50. I've got no clue about what the hell I'm doing most of the days. And you're right. I'm pretty serious about what I do. It's important stuff, but lighthearted too. So let's play.
Yeah, big time. All right, so just kind of maybe a slightly different start point, jumping off point, just given the nature of your kind of experience and insights, really, Simon. What does purpose mean to you, and like why has it become central in who you are and how you go to work?
Wow. I mean, that's a interesting question because the answer to that question has evolved significantly over the years. I mean, I think when I first started out, purpose meant something like something written down on a piece of paper that was meaningful. I mean,
Yeah,
it was something that was a statement of intent in the universe that meant something more than the sum of your own parts. It's like
yeah,
something that's bigger than you. I think today purpose is like that core inner motivation, that core secret source. For
yeah,
me, my purpose is all about my kind of my uncommon sense, the thing that makes me unique in the world and yet connected to everything.
yeah,
Um, and these days, rather than it being a thing that's written down, I think for me now it's almost like this whisper on the wind. It's my calling. It's
yeah,
it's the thing that's drawing me forth in life. And sometimes I don't quite know exactly what it is, but it's there. It's present. It's a feeling.
yeah,
Instead of getting people to write things down, a lot of times these days I'm asking people to create mood boards or make a sense of it because It's not clear. It's also, the other thing I think that's important is it's not the voice in my head. It's the
Yes.
voice that comes quietly from beyond me, because I find that mostly the voice in my head is some form of egoic fear or, drive, if that makes any sense.
It makes a ton of sense, and already there's like loads of stuff that that I want to kind of grab onto and wrestle with. But let's just stay with that kind of final point for a second. The difference in the voices, and I'm curious around two things. One is, how did you become aware that the voices were different and coming from different places? And then how do you continue to acknowledge and pay attention to the difference in those voices and utilize them, access them, engage with them differently?
Hmm. And that's another great question. And the truth immediately goes to me. I have an image of myself riding up a hill on a bike. It was in near Leatherhead in Surrey. I married a lady called Lucy, a wonderful human being who remains a really good friend of mine. It's my ex-wife. And I was suffering, had suffered most of my life from some significant form of mental illness. I'd had it looked at a number of times. There's some life history there probably in it. But the voices in my head used to take me over. They used to command me. And I think I got really scared one day when someone said, I remember watching a TV program and it's like, be careful what you think because, it's you manifest it. And I think I realized through the process of getting myself better, nothing really worked. The drugs definitely didn't work. I gave them up quickly. Um,
Yeah.
they actually made me worse. The counseling mildly helped. What I found in the moment was reframing the voices in my head, which were loud at the time, very
Yeah.
self-critical, very fear-orientated. And I learned through the process of when I was riding up the hill, and I was unwell, I used to cycle, and every time I used to use a positive affirmation for each turn of the cycle wheel. And so
Wow.
when a negative thought came into my head, I feel quite emotional now. I taught myself a mantra of I am love. I am
Yeah.
love. And I used my mantra to drown out the voices of the other system.
Yeah.
Um,
Wow.
and that helped. And slowly, after repeating these mantras of "I'm worth it," "I'm enough," I am love," I realized these voices, other voices, started to go away. And so, yeah, it's a strange thing, but I think it's come from suffering and overly listening to the voices of criticism, the voices of fear, the voices of arrogance, even at times, the voices kind of beckoning you to do things that you maybe
Yeah.
don't want to do, make choices you don't want to make. And actually, through that process, I realized that what I'd heard that person say on that either TV show or radio show, that the things you think define you, is actually not true.
Yeah.
The voice in your head is not you; they're just thoughts. It's only the thoughts you choose to act upon that define you. And I noticed that nuance was
Yeah.
massive. And so I realized there was this voice in my head that told me a whole bunch of rubbish, a whole bunch of bloody lies, and a whole bunch of misinformation through being ill.
Yeah. Yeah, brilliant. And well, I say yeah, brilliant. I'm sorry that you kind of went through that experience. I guess the yeah, brilliant bit is the kind of the insight that's generated there in the kind of the differentiation between the kind of the words that are being told to you or fed to you, and then the choices that you make in terms of the actions that you have, and which one actually defines who you are. And so I'm wondering then, you almost described this kind of sense of purpose as being a voice that was outside of you, kind of pulling you towards something. So when did that kind of voice then appear in this journey, and how did you understand its difference, its distinction from the voices that you'd experienced before?
Because it gave me a different feeling in my body, a different sense of being. And I looked at the moments where I almost, look at this process we call work with a lady called Kate Downey Evans, and we work in the space of genius mindset, of identifying the moments when you're at your best and what you're thinking. And what I noticed about those moments was those moments where the voice wasn't inside my head. It was almost like you say, outside of my body, beckoning me
Yeah.
forwards. And I just had a different sense, a more floaty sense in my body. My background's theatre. In those days when I was riding up the hill, that was a day when I was traveling from my theatre to my home. Um,
Yeah.
and being an actor, you had to do a lot of work on yourself, do a lot of work on sensing into things, listening to different voices, listening to different motivations. And I think the training of actors, the arts actually, is really interesting. People call them the soft skills. I call them the skills for hard times, because actually
Yeah.
you are having to become aware of what's going on in your body and how your body is affecting your mind and what your mind is saying, and seeing the connection between you and all of the things inside of you, but then also to go beyond you. And so it was through experimentation, I think, of working with myself and having to play characters, having to set up different scenes, and understanding their inner motivations, that I started to discover mine.
Yeah.
And also, even further back than that, I think in the upset of my parents' very messy divorce, I found my community in theatre. That was my moment. I found, at the moment where I felt most rejected by my parents and their messiness, I found theatre as a child, and that was the moment where I felt most connected, most joy, and was able to follow a path. And through that theatre experience, I found this state called flow. So when I was acting, I wasn't I wasn't thinking. I wasn't, those kind of sporting moments. I used to find it in rugby. I find it in sailing. Is those moments where your body and everything's just happening, and you're almost above yourself, and you're in it. You're in the system. You're surrendered to the whole blooming madness of it all. It all could go wrong, but you're kind of in it and just prepared, allowing your body to do it. So it's that state of flow. That's the moment where
Yeah.
I feel, and I've got goosebumps on my body now. It's like, that's the moment where I found purpose. And having the fortune of working in theatre, I discovered flow. I discovered that state, and it was very different from the contracted state that was the opposite of fear.
Yeah, amazing. And when I listen to you describe that journey and experience, Simon, there's and especially when you're kind of sharing how you experience flow, because again, flow is one of those terminologies, a bit like mindset, where we kind of hear it, but unless you've experienced it for yourself and have a sense for yourself what it feels like, it can be quite I almost want to use the word disjointed, and I guess that's partly because the experience of flow is the one where the kind of the body and the mind are aligned, and in a sense of almost kind of freedom in the interaction between the two of them. And so when you talk about, kind of sailing or rugby or or performing in general, that things are lined up, things are joined up, things are connected.
It's that connection.
And
Yeah.
yeah, it's the connection, right? And understanding where and how to cultivate that kind of connection. How has that then grown and evolved, your understanding of that over time?
Well, I think as I found it first in theatre, I think I buried it for a while. My my son was diagnosed autistic about the age of 2.5, and he didn't really speak and make eye contact till like 5 or 6 years old. It was a difficult time, um,
Yeah,
and my job in theatre became impossible. The number of hours that demanded of me, the way that I was working, 100-hour weeks, very low income. We were living in a council flat at the time, just wouldn't work. And so I moved into the world of commerce. I had to get a
yeah,
job. I had to get something more stable. Simon had to grow up, and I think I buried it for a while, and that made me very unhappy. I went back into all sorts of forms of depression and lostness and disconnection, until I joined the BBC. And the BBC was back to this idea of a feeling. When I walked through the door of the BBC, I was like, oh, I'm in my tribe. This is where I'm meant to
yeah,
be. Again, it wasn't a thought. It wasn't something conscious. It was just wow, I'm connected. I feel part of something worthwhile. And so
yeah,
that motivated me. I worked harder and I was healthier while I was working harder, if that makes any sense. So I started to notice
yeah,
and
yeah,
discern that. Um, and then later in life, just finding, I think now is the moments. It's evolved to the point where that's how I coach. I mean, or how I run an event. If I'm in a room with 10 people, 500 people, 3,000 people, or I'm coaching one-on-one, I've learned to connect to myself to the wider system. This might sound weird, but I like find that sense of purpose. It's a very quiet, a
Yeah.
calm place. Rumi says it in the poem. It's a field, and it's a place beyond judgment and beyond, right doing and wrong doing. There's that beautiful Rumi poem, and it's like a field. And when I sit in that field, things come through me. Life
Yeah.
happens for me, not to me, if that makes any sense. And so,
Mm.
it's evolved to be a place where I do my best work from. And I've worked out that when I'm in that place, I'm living my purpose, helping people see themselves and see their lives from multiple other perspectives.
Yeah. And so let's just break this down for a second, Simon, because there's so much richness in this for people who are listening to this conversation. A, let's help them kind of make sense of these different layers, and also B, kind of access some of it, like utilize it for themselves. In that, the first thing for me is this understanding of your definition of purpose now is in a feeling, is in a felt experience. It's not about a written articulation, and there's a difference between those two things. One helpfully led to the other, so it's not about kind of right or wrong here. It's about understanding how you experience purpose and a willingness to both own that in the moment and let go of it as you understand it more. So there's something about that which I'd be really interested in your kind of your perspective on. Then there was also something here about tension. And you started with kind of purpose being the unique contribution, but also what makes me unique in the world, but also connects me to everything, and this kind of sense of system in the universe, and being able to hold the tension between who we are and what's happening beyond us. And I think the way that you just used that example there of almost kind of being on stage, and if you're in front of hundreds or even potentially thousands of people, there is a way to be both calm in yourself and connected to all of those people at the same time, and being able to bring that to the fore. So if I'm listening to this, Simon, I'm thinking, like, trying to assess where I am on that journey and how I make sense of purpose, and how I can use it to hold tension between my unique contribution and connectedness to the world. Like, where do I start to access that? What's the kind of the useful elements of the journey that you would play back to people?
Well, I mean, it does, ironically, as you speak, it does start with maybe being a bit more traditional in approach, and eye orientated in asking some simple questions about who am I, like
Yeah.
how do I see myself, even though at one level you're also describing the system where later on down the line you start to realize there is no I, because I exist in relationship with everything. But at first, almost need to forget that. Let's just start the journey with
Yeah.
who am I? Who am I? Who am I really? What was I? What was I born into? What was I born to do into the family system and the community that I came from? Even if the carers that you had didn't particularly look after you well, they gave you an energy, even if you rebelled against them. I've written about this a number of times, that your rebellion against your parents is a form of following, right? Or your rebellion against the community or the religion that you came from is a form of following, because the energy of it still exists in you. You're doing the opposite because in spite of something. And so the
Yeah.
first step, I think, is looking back and asking, who am I as a function of everything that came before me, of all of the things that even before my life that were learnt and taught to me, all the way down to, for me, um, finish all the food on your plate, being a statement that came from the war and through my grandmother into my mother into me. And I love food and I
Yeah.
overeat food. But I know actually now, just so
Yeah.
looking at all these inner motivations and drivers, who am I? What do I stand for? What are my values? What is it what gives me joy? What brings me energy? And there's a process of writing and journaling and exploring and walking and thinking. So that process I don't want to dismiss, because actually my
Yeah.
purpose would be, if I articulated it in words, would be something along the lines of supporting people, to reframe their personal narrative, their life, their story, their definition of who they are, in order to, let go of, disentangle themselves from life's history and create them as a memory. How do they shift from being a memory of their past to being a memory of their own future, disentangling themselves from
Yeah.
the stuff that doesn't help them. And so I wrote it first. Actually, the first version of my purpose statement I wrote is on a banner somewhere in a temple in Bhutan, on top of a mountain. And I remember the person took it and then took a photograph of it and sent it back to me. So writing it is an important part of the process. But it's
Yeah.
almost like at the point of it being written, I then throw it away, because I realized the second part of what you're saying, which is complex but simple at one level, is the surrendering to the fact that there is a system beyond me, and that
Yeah.
there is no beyond you. Actually, you are it. Like it's like a dance, right? Every move you make, the system moves too, and you move in response to it. It's about building awareness of where that feels in flow, where that brings joy, where that brings, actually, not even so much joy. There's so many people who pursue happiness and enjoyment. Like, I've got a very nice car. I enjoy my car. It does not give me fulfillment, right? Things
Yeah.
give me enjoyment, but they don't give me fulfillment. And so it's that fulfillment thing that I think I'm looking at as I'm dancing with the world, of what gives me that inner sense of bigness, big feeling. And I don't mean arrogance, I mean wholeness and connection,
Yes.
to
Yeah.
it all.
Yeah.
And because, and most of that comes, that flow state we talked about earlier, which you said is sometimes disconnecting for people because they feel like they can't get it. The problem with trying to get it is you don't get it, because trying to get something is an ego state. You're in fit. I must have it.
Yeah.
It's like I need it. I want it. The problem is in those mindsets, you don't get it. It's surrender. It's when you let go of the need to have it, you find it, which means you have to step beyond your
Yeah.
fear. And so, just to be really frank with you, when you talk about how do you step onto stage, I remember in most flow, I am on stage and I'm bricking it. So I have fear, but it doesn't have me. So I'm both bricking it and really calm. I don't know if I'm making any sense. It's this capacity, I think, of living to be on the balcony of your ego self. That's when you're in purpose. When I'm in purpose, in the purpose mindset, I'm almost beyond myself, allowing myself to be in fear or in grief, but still moving and still
Yeah.
fluid. And does that make any sense?
Yeah, and it makes sense to me, and if I kind of just play back how it's making sense to me, there are almost two things emerging from what you're describing. Where my feeling state goes here is into, when you talk about surrender, there is something about acceptance, and when you talk about kind of allowing, there is something here about kind of permission, and almost this willingness to create a level of acceptance of yourself for yourself, that surrenders just to the world
Yeah,
beyond what's happening
yeah,
inside you. And like how, you talked about that idea of cycling up the hill and the kind of the voices, and the kind of the journey to understanding purpose being, who are you really? That word really
yeah.
felt important, because there is can I acknowledge, can I own, can I just accept who I am? Can I surrender to that? Because in that there is then freedom and choice to cultivate who I want to become
Mm,
beyond that, and into something different. And associated with that is then giving yourself permission to not just be one thing or act in a certain way or feel a certain stuff, but permission to experience all of it or just more. Can I feel fear and be in flow at the same time? So I guess the way I'm making sense of it is in those two things, is in there's an acceptance element and a permission element. I
makes
don't know
total
if that
sense.
if that connects with
Yeah, it
what you're
makes total
describing.
sense. And yet I'm noticing my stomach churn a little bit because I have a problem with the word acceptance. Having worked with thousands and thousands of
Yeah.
people, when I use the word acceptance, too often they are thinking that you're saying make the past right. And at some level, I am
Mm.
saying make the past right. But another level, I'm actually
Yeah.
saying acknowledge. You don't have to love your history.
Yeah.
You don't have to love all the characters in your history. And the problem with acceptance is it's almost like I bow to you. Some of those characters in my past, I don't want to bow to, but I must not exclude them. I need to include them
Yeah.
so that I can learn from them. Because if I believe life happens for me, not to me, then every low in my life, every tragedy and struggle has meaning and has a sense of something. And the meaning I may have made of it then, if I look back at it now, actually maybe a different meaning. And so it's for me, it's that looking back with new eyes, with fresh eyes, to understand what how it served me, how all of that served me. So I'm gonna shift. I think my word for it is acknowledgement. You used it. I say to
Yeah.
people, how can you, even if you can't accept some of your history, acknowledge it happened? Uh, and some of the things you
Yeah.
did that you're even disgusted by in yourself. There are things I look back in the past and think, why did I do that? Or how could I have done that to that person? Or feel guilt or shame about. But to acknowledge that in that feeling, as a funny friend of mine, there's a friend of mine, a lady called Claire Pollard. She's like in the top clinical psychologists in the world. And I said to her one day, I worry that I could be a bad person. Look at all the bad things I did in my life. And she said, dear Simon, psychopathic people don't tend to worry about the bad things they did. They tend to have enjoyed them. So it tells me that you worry so much, you ain't a psychopath. You're probably a hyper empath. So I always played around with that. But like looking back and say it is in the line of acceptance, but acknowledge that happened. Question, what do I learn? What do I learn from it? And what of it do I carry forwards? And often too much of the time, we're
Yeah.
carrying those stories and those things and projecting them into the future. And actually, if we can just acknowledge that was then and this is now, I can start to separate myself from the former beings that I was and the former moments I encountered, and start to get myself present to
Yeah.
now and who I really am today. And that's where I go to who
Yeah.
am I really? Not the person I project in the world, the things I say I am, or even how I'm experienced. It's like, how am I really? Like, what is my sense of who I am? And
Yeah.
then you're right, permission to dance, permission to fuck it up, permission to play and lose, permission to play and win and enjoy the win. It's okay to love the win. It's okay to mess it up. It's okay to, yeah, yeah. And so permission to give yourself and permission to step through your fear. Because on the other big, it's out of your comfort zone. That's where the learning zone is. We know this. You see the diagrams on the walls of all these learning rooms. What I try to do is say, go and experiment in real life beyond your comfort zone and write down what you expect is going to happen and then tell me what really happened. 99% of the time, what we expect was going to happen when we give our self permission doesn't happen.
I love the reframe around acceptance versus acknowledgement. I guess there's something really beautiful in being able to just discuss the different connotation associated with different words and language. And again, not from a place of judgment of like who's right, who's wrong, but actually how we imbue different
So
words with
important.
meaning. And you brought up the M word, and I'm so glad we're in that kind of space, which is, the fundamental foundation of all of this work around
Yeah.
purpose is meaning. That's what we're really talking about. And I hear you describing the experience of acceptance as almost a process of finding the meaning. And again, it's
No.
not judgment. It's not I'm right or wrong or this must happen. It's a, do I understand it? And can I give myself permission to continue to try and evolve my understanding of it
Yeah.
as I evolve? I guess that feels then closer to this concept of surrender that you were talking about, which is I'm not trying to necessarily fix something
Oh,
or square something. I'm surrendering to the
yeah.
acknowledgement of it.
I mean
Um,
that I mean
yeah,
that's totally. I mean my whole career was based on helping fix people in the world around me and seeing problems. And actually, in reality, if you get beyond judgment, there aren't problems, there are just patterns, and there's nothing to fix. There's almost like there's so much to fix, but nothing to fix. If you don't have a fixer mindset, then, for me as a coach, it's really helpful not to, actually, because in that position, I become parentified in my coaching relationships or my organizational culture relationships,
Yeah.
because I'm here to fix you. No, I'm not here to fix you. I'm here to support you in doing your best thinking, in finding out who you want to be, whether that be an individual or an organization. That's my job in helping them find purpose, or actually supporting them. I use the word support because helping feels like I'm lifting them up. It's something active for me. Support means I kind of feel like I'm around.
Yeah.
It's like that acceptance thing. If anyone's listening
Yeah.
to this and going, no, acceptance is the right word for me, that's okay. Like, from my point of view, that's okay. From my point of view, the problem I have is that there's a dark shadow in my history, and someone who abused me when I was younger, I do not want to accept that behavior. I want to say, F that behavior. That behavior was not appropriate. But if I go to the next stage and I tone the volume down and go to acknowledgement, if I acknowledge that happened and what did I learn, my whole career was based out of the back of that abuse. I saw dark that some people have never seen. And in that seeing the dark, I believe I can see the light. The the bandwidth of my life means I can have a broader spectrum of emotions, and therefore I can embrace it. And that's what acknowledgement gave me, an ability to move on.
Yeah. Amazing. And I'm wondering if that, that almost naturally moves us into a conversation of where and how you find and maintain your level of self-worth today. Because, you've described really eloquently these kind of experiences in this journey, the kind of the almost the past element and the sense making into this moment. But there's obviously a constant awareness, a constant effort, a constant connection to maintain that and to engage with that. So what does that look like for you now, having done all of this work and have kind of generated all of these insights? Where does self-worth come for you? Like, where and how do you find meaning now?
Horrible question. If I'm honest,
You're welcome.
It's horrible. It's horrible because I've got to admit I'm not the bloody guru that I want to be yet. I never will be. I'm inconsistent. That's where the statement. I'm a messy man, not mucking around, and it's like, I'm inconsistent at it. It takes discipline. It's every single day the practices of some form of meditation, and I think we've exclusivized whatever your word is, over created this idea that meditation is like sitting in the corner of the room with your eyes closed in some position and listening to Headspace or something like that, which, by the way, great things to do. Lying there and doing that is a fantastic thing. But there are walking meditations, there are open eye meditations. By the way, people find their flow state, some of them when they're running, some of them when they're moving, some of them in the gym, some of them when they're reading a book. And so the practices of finding yourself in that balcony state, whatever version of it is that you do that is a mindfulness exercise, whether that be actual physical exercise or whether that be reading a book or listening to music, or for some people it's in the shower,
I was honestly, are you in my head? I was literally about to say, because it sounds a bit ridiculous.
Yep.
I in the shower, and that, like, there is, when you describe flow as being kind of beyond yourself and feeling, kind of like bigger than, I can just be lost in, and they're like the pens that you can draw on. Like, if I could get away with that in my house and it wouldn't turn into my children kind of graffitiing like but I would be scribbling all the time, because I just go into a place of freedom of thought and I love sport and I'm super active, but
there you go.
it's
Well,
the shower.
actually, the research, we worked with the Neuro Leadership Institute in North America, and when we were designing a big program, David Rock and his work, and we worked directly with them and translated some of their work into experiential work. and they basically say the bathroom as a whole. So let's not really go into the conversation, but there are moments in the bathroom, full stop, where people are, that's why you get magazine racks. Let's go there. Let's like why are there little magazine racks and reading books? And a friend of mine had a set of pens and a writable on wall. So why don't you do that? I mean, what's the fear? And just the notes and the little thoughts that are all over this wall. All the taboo things in life, I think are hilarious because we don't talk about them, but we do lose ourselves on the loo sometimes, staring out the window. I many times have sat there way too long, way longer, hiding away from the world, staring out the window.
Then
Exactly right.
physiologically is appropriate because you can't stand up afterwards. Yeah.
But to the point that I'm trying to make is, for me, it's the discipline. It's a discipline of knowing both my energetic boundaries, sleep, food, mindfulness in whatever form it comes. It doesn't take just intention; it takes attention constantly. That's the constant, because we're inconsistent as human beings. I like many. I read Eckhart Tolle, right, and I read that years ago. His first book, and I was like, this state is impossible. I'm like, if someone said to me, "Oh yeah, Simon, you know a lot about this," I said, "Yeah, I'm just your everyday human who's trying to kind of messily do this. Uh, I don't believe myself to be able to get to a consistent state. Part of my human experience on this planet is about living with my human experience. It's like living with it, and how do I get on the balcony of it? Curiosity is my biggest helping hand, and discipline. Curiosity and discipline.
So can you talk about this like concept of being on the balcony about it? Like for those that maybe don't understand that kind of language or that premise, what is the experience that you're describing when you use that
I'm
terminology?
describing the fact that we spend a lot of our time in the moment, thinking we're in the moment, actually. We're in the busyness on the dance floor. We're on the dance floor. Ron Heifetz, I think, coined the phrase in his book around adaptive leadership, the balcony and the dance floor. And we're on the dance floor when we're in the moment. And in those moments, we're hyper-focused on the thing, right? The problem is when we're hyper-focused on the thing, we're often in threat state. We're trying to drive something through. We're trying to achieve that goal, hit that target or whatever it is. And oftentimes in those states, we're in a threat state. We're fearful of losing our jobs or not being enough. And the balcony state is this ability to be able to step almost above yourself, take a breath, and ask yourself the question, what's really going on here? How am I behaving? What am I believing to be true? Because if you go to like Daniel Kahneman's work on thinking fast and slow, and I know this is an older text, but it's the original research. It's just being played out time and time again, where you've got system 1, system 2 thinking. Our brain is naturally efficient. I almost said lazy. I edited my words. It's not lazy. It's highly efficient. It's the most energy hungry part of our body. Just need to look at the neuroscience behind it, neurobiological studies that show our brain eats a lot of calories. So our body is built for survival, and therefore it wants to use less. So therefore, automatic thinking and assumptions are the nature of human beings. And once you realize that I make assumptions and I invent stories and I fill the gaps in people's conversations and I make meaning out of words that they haven't made, once you realize that, then you start to ask yourself questions. And being on the balcony is this capacity to be able to see yourself saying something, seeing yourself doing something, and asking, from where am I responding? Where am I motivated from here? Am I being motivated out of fear or drive, have to, should do, obligation, past experiences, past fears? Or am I being motivated by something that's calling me forward, by my sense of purpose? And so for me, when we talk about purpose, for me, it's almost an operating system, right? We're either operating out of fear at some degree or we're operating out of purpose for some degree. And the two are connected on a line. And so asking myself those questions while I'm doing it, it's a practice. And that's why meditation is a really good way into this, because it's called splitting your attention. Focusing part of your attention on your breath means that you become detached from the emotions of your thinking if you practice it well. I once thought that being meditative was finding this white, beautiful space where, this beautiful harmony of bliss. Actually, I've learned that meditation is the ability to sit and pay attention to my busy brain and my busy body, and notice what's going on and just see it, not even try to fix it or touch it.
Yeah.
And so that's what I mean about the balcony. It's about your ability to split your attention between your dance floor sense of self and this space that we can create. Viktor Frankl said it. In between the stimulus and our response, there's a thing called time. That balcony moment is that space, the ability to find that time. And I think the equation, is flawed, because it's not between the stimulus and the response. You can be on the balcony of yourself in any moment.
And how does that, how do you, I'm going to find a better question in a second, it's coming. But there's something here about the kind of the relatedness of purpose itself to enable the splitting of attention. So I guess the original question I was asking of you was, where and how do you continue to connect to what's meaningful in your life right now, and find and continue to find and maintain your sense of self-worth? And what I heard you describing was it's a continual practice. It's not something that just happens for me. It has to be not just intentional, but then there was another word as well, attentional. And so there's something for me in, does purpose enable that as well? Is it like a virtuous cycle, or is purpose the outcome of that attentional practice? Like where's the kind of the connection in those experiences for you?
Well, I think I was talking in two frames there. One is purpose as a mindset, being purposeful. And by the way, purposeful as well, if you take meaning from it, I can be very purposefully bad as well. But if we're taking so language is a hard one. So it's hard to find the language for this exactly. But one, I think, is the mindset of purpose, being in that state of connection. And when we're purposeful, I believe in the generative sense of being purposeful, we are others orientated. We are not just thinking about self. We're thinking of beyond ourselves into others' domains. And that's a mindset that is about, excuse me, that's a mindset that takes discipline to practice. So, because in fear, we're self-orientated, we're in protection, we're in, we're in that mode of, it's diminishing, it's smaller, we're less collaborative, we're less perceptive, we're less creative, it's shrinking. In the purpose state, we're more expansive. So there's a mindset, and Carol Dweck probably got closest to it with growth mindset. I mean, she frames it in that way. I have a different, the reason why I call it kind of the play in purpose is because I think in that moment you're connected. I think purpose is the connecting thing that I'm connecting to. And when I say it, you say outcome. Yes, it is my sense of who I'm becoming, the emergent version of me and the impact I want to create in the world. You know, we've asked those questions for years, haven't we?
Yeah.
What is your legacy? What do you want to leave behind? I asked a guy a few weeks ago. He said, I said, what's your purpose in life? He said, hard work, was the number one value in his purpose. And I said, well, hard work sounds like an input, in service of what? And that's the question I always get to ultimately. Purpose is in service of something, not servant to, that's ego, in service of something. Richard Barrett put that as his, Richard Barrett, if you want to do some research, he did 7 levels of consciousness, and service is level 1. Level 1 is survival, level 7 is service. So it is also the destination, but I don't believe in destinations. I don't believe life's a journey. I believe that it's a dance. It's there is no. This is a funny one as well. Someone once said to me, Simon, but what if there's no point in life? What if there is no point? And this was traumatic to this individual, like deeply traumatic. He said, I don't see any point to my life. And I said, well, what's the benefit of all of that? And he said, well, I can't see any. Well, what if there is no point? What do you get to do? To choose who I want to be? Like, there you go. You get to choose. There's no point. You get to choose. And so I don't see it as a destination. There is no end destination. It's a way of being. And you are right. There is an outcome, a legacy that you're looking for in all of that that's helpful to describe. And there's a way of being in all that that takes intention and attention. Actually, I think it's best described by that thing:
Mm.
intention. What is it you're trying to create in the world, and attention, the discipline of practicing it in every moment, because you are going to get overcome by your ego. My fear of rejection from my parents' divorce, my fear of not being good enough from my not being, my ADHD diagnosis, and not being very academic. Being very academic. I need to reframe that. I'm very academic. I'm highly good at maths, but I'm not. I don't learn in the way they teach at schools. That taught me that I wasn't good enough because I didn't fit in. Neither of those things are true. My sense of purpose has helped me step beyond that and have a sense of self-worth, and that's what every human is valuable. But only human beings can create their value, I believe, at the moment they realize they have value, and that's the point of purpose work.
Yes. And there's like a 1-2 punch here.
Go
There's
on.
like a Mike Tyson moment, Simon, around the and I don't want to lose it now by getting slightly carried away. I'm going to start with where you just finished, which is this idea of we can only, how did you phrase it? We can only create value in the
Yes.
moment that we realize we have
Yeah.
value. Is that how you framed it? Just there's something incredibly powerful about that when it comes to this idea of kind of acknowledgement and permission. So I'll hold that bit, and then there's the other bit there around, well, the mechanism here is about intention and attention. The intention of who am I and who do I want to be, and the attention of, do I have the discipline to kind of come back to that, because I know I'm going to fall off, and falling off is okay, but I need to bring the attention back to where I want it to be, which is the need for the intention. And it feels to me like those are just two colossally useful insights for people to kind of hold and to wrestle with. Like, what do I acknowledge that I have value and therefore can create value in the world? Like, how liberating is that for people to own and to be comfortable with? And I use those two words with a bit of trepidation, because that's really difficult to do for a lot of people, is to feel like I have value, to feel like I have worth. Yet everybody does.
And that's because we're taught and coded in our society to not be arrogant, and we feel like we need to be humble. But we've misunderstood the distinction between arrogance and confidence. There is a difference. If you take two continuums, we think we're on the same continuum. If I overplay confidence, I'll become arrogant. So the opposite of arrogance is humility. The opposite of confidence is shyness, withholding self. You can be humble and confident. And that's the best form. I don't need to take the space. That's egoic, needing to take the space. I don't have to have a voice. I choose to lean in confidence of the value that I know I bring. And the question that's emerged for me here that I ask often of teams is, what's the unique value that only this group of people can create in the world? And that's the truth of it on the individual level. What's the unique value? You have a unique value. And if you're in denial that you do, and if you're listening to this going, no, I don't have a unique value, then there's some of the earlier work I talked about to do, which is to look back into your history and ask yourself, why is it I might believe that? Because we're taught to play small. And when we play small, like this Newtonian physics, it's like the powers of the world have power over me. And that's how we're brought up, to conform, to play. And I'm not saying, let's go out there and break all the rules, but I love breaking rules safely, as it were. Like, I don't drive at 120 miles an hour down the motorway, because that's just stupid, right? Because I've got a conscience, right? But I'm talking about, how dare I, stay small in my little world? Why don't I bring what I've got to the world? Because it's important. I see people growing from it, so why wouldn't I share it? And so, with this Newtonian world of where we think all the big forces have power over us and I'm this small thing, actually, let's just invert it to a kind of, a quantum physics world where the tiniest cell can have a massive influence, like the butterfly effect, which I know, at some levels isn't true, but, a microcellular thing, one person can make a massive difference in what they say and what they do.
Yeah. What a provocation for people listening um to sit with, like, do I and can I um see, feel, share the value, the unique contribution that I'm able to make in the world. And I totally agree with you. I believe that everybody has a unique contribution to make. The risk aversion, which I think comes back to humility and creates a level of anxiety, is that when people talk about purpose or this unique contribution, that somewhere along the line in a purpose conversation, it's all been blown out of proportion. And unless your sense of purpose or the
Oh,
contribution you're going to make is grandiose to some degree and is going to save the planet and transform everything, then it's not worthwhile. And that's such a myth that needs destroying with a cruise missile or 20, because actually our uniqueness is exactly that. It's individual, and so as long as it matters
I
to you,
agree.
then that's all that
And
matters.
I agree with two things there. One, the question I would be asking people is, are you willing to own your unique value? Are you willing to own your value? It's the willingness to own it. Are you really willing? Because
Yeah.
if you're not, then it's about investigating why. What are the voices in your head that and what loyalty do they have to your parents, to your history, to your grandparents, to your life experiences? Your voices in your have a loyalty to your past. They're trying to protect you, but they often don't. And you peel back the layers of those and say, what's the unique value I'm willing to own in the world? I think that's the first question, because I think Marianne Williamson said it, didn't she? She said, we're more scared of the light that we bring in the world than the dark. Our greatest fear,
Yes.
which is such a
Yeah, our
great
greatest
poem.
fear. Yeah.
And I've completely forgotten the second
Yeah.
point you made, but yeah.
Well, obviously wasn't as important as the first point I was making. It was the anxiety around
Oh,
the kind of the purpose or contribution has to be massive and
totally.
like
Oh, we
globally
do this. We have this
transformational, and it
exercise
doesn't.
where we
It's
get people to
yeah,
answer three simple questions, and in a third question, we get them to think about what they want to create in the world. And people feel tempted to go big and grandiose. And do you know what? To impress, that's not purpose. That's of the ego. Because if I'm trying to impress someone with how big I'm going to be, how much impact I'm going to have, it's hard enough to have an impact on a single human being. And at the core of my purpose is to help my son in the world, or support my son in the world, not taking on all the bloody patterns that I, to be a great dad, to be a dad who's fun, but also effervescent, but also honest about what the world's going to be like, and give him a platform to work from, and not pass on all the shit that I picked up along the way. How is he not going to follow the pattern of eat
yeah,
all the food on your plate? How is he going to learn the discipline and control? My middle son, Harvey, he's learned that. He has a discipline. I'm like, that's the best thing I ever did. The next generation is got a discipline around eating that I don't have. I did my job, done it. That was my purpose, done it.
and but there's also a tension in that too, Simon, right? Because you know for sure that they're going to pick up their own shit that they've got to deal with, and part of the role responsibility is to
Totally.
enable them
Which is
to
why,
see it and to manage it.
I'll be honest, and maybe Harvey will listen to this, but and he's heard me say it in front of groups before. But I was in a therapy session with him. We got called. His mother Lucy and I got called into a therapy session, and in that therapy session, we sat in the room with our kind of heads bowed, waiting to hear the news about how his son's going to declare something. Is he a drug addict? Is he coming out? What was he going to be saying? What's he going to come out with? I don't know what he's going to say. Have we been awful, evil parents? Did we do something? Did something happen to him we don't know about? And he said, "Your divorce was too perfect. I never understood why you got divorced. You just seemed so good, happy people together." And I've never had a chance to grieve because it was too perfect. And I was like, oh, and I laughed. It was so inappropriate at the moment. I felt the laugh in my body, but that laughter was an acknowledgement and a relief of like at myself of like, God, my parents' divorce was so messy. I tried to do this so well, and in doing it, I fucked him up. You can't win, so all you can do, exactly as you say, is how do I pass on the awareness to him in order to be able to see it for himself and to be able to decode the meaning he made from what I did or what his mother and I did. He made meaning from it, and he can edit that story. We all have the ability to edit our life history. What meaning do you make of your past and who you've become?
Yeah.
And what meaning do you want to make? Do you choose to make? You called to make in your life?
I think that's a kind of a perfect moment to just think about the future and what's to come, Simon. And how does your feeling experience of purpose guide you into the unknown of the future? What does that look like?
And I
How
mean,
does it serve you to go forward?
oh, sorry, I had a bleep. Oh, that's exactly it. I mean, if life's a dance and not a journey, doesn't really have a destination, and it has this path that you follow that you think you have choices on when you don't really have choices. You just follow the path. You're like, when you've made choice A, you didn't make choice B, so it's gone. Like there's just one path. And on this path, there are highs and lows and upsets and all of this kind of stuff. You know that there are going to be highs and lows. Because that's life, that's being human. You know you're going to make mistakes. You're going to have the glorious times, the times of massive mess ups and distraction, the times of grief and loss and pain and all of those things. And purpose is the thing that helps me when I connect to it, that voice beyond me that enables me to climb, even sometimes wearily or reluctantly, onto that balcony. It's the energy. I mean, I believe purpose to be life force. I believe it to be the energy of life. Life on earth has a funny thing about it. This is what I noticed when I started doing the purpose work. Why I'm curious about this work is most of the universe, if we believe the science around it, is like a massive firework going off over 300 trillion years. Like, so the firework goes off, and then the universe expands. This is a simplistic version as I can do, and the sparkles of the firework are the suns, right, of the stars. And round and you know, things are happening to those gases and rocks and matter, and planets were created, and the universe continues to expand. I often ask people, how fast are you moving? Well, right now. And they go, well, I'm not moving. You can see I'm not moving. I'm like, well, you're moving at least 50 something thousand miles an hour because the Earth's going around the sun. Okay, so how fast are we moving? 50,000 miles an hour. I'm like, no, you're not, because the sun is going around the galaxy at about 1,000,000 miles an hour. Okay, so how fast are you moving? About 1,000,000. I'm like, well, the galaxy is going around something else we don't know. And how fast is that going? I don't actually know. So when you talk about the voyage into the unknown, is the truth, if we admit it, is that life is unknown. And however planned we think we are, just think back to your life. Life's caught us out. Purpose is the ability to find energy in the moments when you feel like there's none, when everything's against you, when you've lost everything, the energy to get on the balcony and go, I know this will pass. Or even if I don't believe it will pass, it's something I need to go through. And it's the energy to keep moving. And when you look at the research, I can't remember who it was, Hill and Knowlton, that was an advertising agency, Hill and something, Hill and Toronto, North America, people with a sense of purpose, a longitudinal study showed, go to the doctors less, live life longer. It's life energy, it's life force.
Yeah. Amazing. And Simon, I think this is the perfect place for us to pause our conversation here with just that notion of purpose being life force, it being an energy within us that enables us in times of wonder or times of hardship to be able to find and see a perspective and just continue to move. And I love being in conversation with you and seeing how quickly you can go to depth. It's amazing. And I know for sure that the people that listen to this podcast are just going to have to get in the shower or go to the toilet, go out for a walk, just to sit and really absorb some of the richness that they've heard you share in these experiences. So thank you so much for taking the time to
It's been fantastic.
Be in this conversation.
I feel like I need a cup of tea and a little sit somewhere quiet right now. Put a towel over my head. I've even blown my own mind.
Well, here's the cups of tea, my friend.
Okay.
I look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the Excitable Soul podcast. We appreciate your support and would love you to subscribe, rate, review, and recommend if you can. It makes a massive difference. Equally, if you're interested in uncovering, understanding, and unleashing your unique sense of purpose or that of your teams, come and explore our purpose immersion programs at theexcitablesoul.com. We look forward to hearing from you there or being with you on our next episode. Have an incredible day.